Hi, and you're very welcome. This is Anne Walsh from Get Good at Excel, and today we're just going to look at pivot tables. We're just going to start from the very beginning with pivot tables. So what pivot tables are generally used for is that they allow you to take vast quantities of information and essentially assemble them into some kind of meaningful pattern. So if you look at the list here, we have invoice date, customer, product, county. And just before I get started, I just want to say a little bit about the way to set up your list. This is a little bit like cooking in the sense that the more stuff you have prepared and the more organised you are before you start, the much smoother the whole process of creating your pivot table is going to be. So if you look at this list that I have here, right, and I'm just going to hop down to the bottom by doing Control and arrow down. Alright, see there we have over 1100 rows in this particular list, right? And I'm just going to hop back up again by doing Control and arrow up. Alright, so I'm back up to the top again. So if you notice here, there's no gaps, no spaces, and it's like with like all the way through. And that's the way you need to have your data set up before you actually create your pivot table. So the way I'm going to begin is I'm just going to begin by clicking in the list, and I go up to Insert, and I go to Pivot Table. Now at the moment I'm in Excel 2010, but this also equally applies to 2007. The steps are the same. So I've clicked in the list, and then I just click on Pivot Table. Now Excel automatically recognises where my list is or the range is, so it automatically selects it, but I could also use an external data source if I wanted to. Second part of this screen is where do I want the pivot table put, and in this case I'm going to put it on a new worksheet simply because I just like to have them divided up and separated out if possible, and then I just click OK. Now when I do that, if you notice up here I get two new ribbons, one of them under my pivot tables tools. So one of them says options and the other says design. And over here on the right hand side, this is the place I'm going to construct my pivot tables. Now for the purposes of this lesson, we're just going to kind of construct one, if you like, from scratch. And let me begin simply by dragging the information into my pivot table structure down here: report filter, column labels, row labels and values. And if you look over here on the list on the left, you'll see what happens as I start to do that. Okay. Now one of the good ideas to do is that when you begin creating a pivot table, drag your numbers down onto the values field. And one of the reasons for that is that sometimes what Excel will do is that if it sees a number field, instead of giving you sort of the default settings of sum, it can kind of give you count. But what I've noticed is that if you actually begin with the values field, for some reason it always seems to actually go straight to sum. Alright, so I'm just going to drag down my value down here. Right. I'm going to drag my county down to row. I'm going to drag my classification to column. Alright, let me just maybe put classification over here onto report filter. And I'm just going to drag my customer down to here. Right. Now if you look up here, I have I've just created my very first pivot table. Right. And you can see here, there's my list of products going across, or customers going across the top, and down here I have my counties down the left. And if you look up here, I have my classification, and if I want to just see the results for just the food sector, I first of all tick the box that says select multiple items, clear the all box, and then click the food box, and I click OK. Right. Now if you notice up here, Excel actually puts a tiny little sort of like a little sieve or a funnel on this part, which actually tells me that there's a filter on it. And then when I want to remove the filter, I just go back here and tick the box for all and click OK. Now I just want to show you two other things just in this creation of just our very basic pivot table. And the first thing is if I come down here to the bottom right hand side, you see there it says sum of value. Okay. Now if I want to use something other than sum, for example average or max or min, if I click here on the little triangle, it brings me up a menu, and at the very bottom of this menu it says Value Field Settings. So let me just click on that. And when I come in here, there's a box or tab that says Summarize Values By. So what I'm going to do is, for example, if I want the average, I click on the average and I click OK. Right. And if you notice here, my values in this field now change, and up here it tells me that's the average of the value. And then the other thing just to show you in this is that if you notice up here, I have 6 decimal places, and usually I don't want 6 decimal places, I might just want the shown in currency. So if I go down here to average a value, I go to value field settings again, And in the bottom left hand side, I just click on number format. Right. And when I do that, I can now change the format of all the numbers, and in this case I'm going to change to currency, 0 decimal places, leave it as the euro symbol, and then click OK. I'm going to click OK again, and here I am back to this one. Okay. So what we've just done in this first lesson on pivot tables, we've just constructed a very simple pivot table. We began by clicking in our list, which is still over here, alright, on sheet 1. When I went to insert and pivot table, insert and then pivot table, I created my pivot table. Over here I constructed my pivot table from my pivot field list, and then all I did is that I went down here and I changed the sum to average. I can change it back to sum, I think, here. Right. And also that I just changed the formatting of the numbers to currency. That is the end of the first lesson. In the next lesson, what we're just going to look at is we're going to look at if you want to create a number of different pivot tables for, let's say, a number of different sectors, and you want to do that quickly. And we're going to use an option called the report filter option. Right? So look forward to seeing you at the next lesson. And remember, if you check out my website, www.getgood@excel, for more lessons and resources. Okay, take care. Gurma Hagath, Slán.
Welcome to Camtasia Studio 7. If you're new to Camtasia Studio and you want to get started quickly, you're in the right place. We encourage you to watch this 5-minute video to learn the basics of using the editor, including how to navigate the timeline, make some basic edits, and add special effects. The preview window is where you see the video during playback. The playback controls are located under the preview window. In fact, the video you're watching in the preview window is a sample project playing directly from the timeline you see below. After you watch this video, we hope you take some time to practice what you've learned using the content on the timeline. So let's start with the timeline. This is where you assemble and edit your videos. At the top of the timeline, tick marks represent time in terms of minutes and seconds. When building a video, you'll work in a horizontal manner, beginning from the left and moving sequentially through time towards the right. To make precise cuts and selection, use the zoom slider to magnify the view of the timeline. And when adding elements to your video, such as a call-out or audio clips, these are placed on different tracks. Tracks are created automatically, when you need them, when elements are added to the timeline. So depending on your video, you may be working with several tracks at one time. To change the position of an element on the timeline, just drag it. To change the length of an element, drag the edges in either direction. An important part of the timeline is the playhead. The playhead moves the timeline and indicates the current frame displayed in the preview window. To view your video, click play in the preview window. Notice how the video and the timeline's playhead stay in sync? Click anywhere on the timeline and the playhead moves to that point. The green section of the playhead is called the in point. Click and drag the in point to make the beginning of a selection. The red section of the playhead is called the out point. Just click and drag the out point to make the end of a selection. To bring the sections of the playhead back together, double-click the gray playhead. To split a video clip, position the playhead at the desired location and click the split button. And if you want to remove a portion of your video, make a selection with the in and out points, then click the cut button. If you make a mistake while editing, click the undo button. Next, we'll look at the clip bin and the library. The clip bin holds recordings, audio files, images, and title slides being used in the project you're currently working on. Then there's the library. It stores video clips, intros, callouts, title slides, and other elements that you want to use from project to project. The library is also pre-populated with professional animations, music, sound effects, and other content you can use in your video for free. To add your own clips or video sequences to the library, make a selection on the timeline, right-click, and choose Add to Library. To include clips and other elements in your video, drag them from the clip bin or library and drop them onto the timeline. The tabs located above the timeline are task pages used for adding and editing special effects. You can add callouts to emphasize a key point. You can insert a transition between clips for a professional look. Apply zoom and pan effects to focus on important details. And draw attention to the cursor by changing the color, size, and more. If you double-click an element on a track, the playhead moves to the beginning of that element, and its task page opens, allowing you to make edits to that element. So we've shown you a few ways you can navigate and edit your video. But how do you get content into your video? Well, to make a new screen recording, click the Record Screen button. If you already have an audio or video recording to use, click the Import Media button. When you've made edits and added effects to your video and you're ready to share it, you need to produce the project to create a shareable video. Click the Produce and Share button, step through the wizard, and Camtasia Studio creates a viewer-friendly, shareable MP4 file ready to upload to Screencast.com, your blog, or a website. Well, it's time for you to try Camtasia Studio out for yourself using the content on the timeline. The help file in Camtasia Studio will help you use each of the Camtasia Studio features and applications. The Learning Center on TechSmith.com has in-depth video tutorials and other sample projects to download and practice with. So we hope you enjoy Camtasia Studio. And happy screencasting!